My pleasure to introduce Mr. Antonio Duran. He is a professor here in the higher education department. Definitely enjoy him as a colleague, and then also to being a student in one of his classes as well. So definitely just want to welcome him, and then also to give some opening remarks and before the introduction of the panelists.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Eric. And hello to everyone and welcome for being here. We are so excited to be able to spend the next hour and a half with you all. As Eric mentioned, my name is Dr. Antonio Duran. I'm an assistant professor in the Administration of Higher Education program. For those of you who may be wondering what that all means, I like to say that I study college environments, college students, how do people grow as a result of coming to college. So some of you may not have even known that that's a field, but one of the things that I study within that broad umbrella is issues of equity when it comes to higher education environments. And so the topic for today is one that is near and dear to my heart. And I am excited to hear what our panelists have to say about issues of equity, implicit bias in the hiring practice kind of context. And so just to give you all an idea of how we're going to be spending our time, of course, we have some prepared questions to ask for the panelists, but I do want to echo Eric in saying that if you all have questions yourselves, please feel free to offer them up either in the general chat function or via the private chat function. And we will also have some concerted time at the end for an open question and answer period. So please do look forward to that. But before further ado, I want to allow our panelists to get a chance to introduce themselves and talk a little bit about the industries that they are representing today. And so first up, I'll turn it over to Greg to introduce himself.
Thank you, Dr. Duran. My name is Greg Lamoureux. I'm a corporate recruiter with Enercon Services out of the Atlanta area. Our company is an engineering consulting firm working primarily with utility organizations and nuclear in the nuclear industry. I've been with the company now for 3 years. We're about 1,100 people strong, based out of Atlanta, and I'm glad to be here.
Awesome. Thank you, Greg. Mandy, would you like to introduce yourself? I don't know if we can hear Mandy for the time being.
On mute.
Yes. So in the meantime, we'll turn it over to Chuck.
Yeah, hey, War Eagle, everybody. I am Chuck Bowers. I'm the area general manager for Train in Alabama. Train's a global leader in air conditioning, heating, and ventilation and building systems. So we work with industrial and commercial customers like Auburn University to help improve their indoor air environments, and in doing so, help the people within those buildings. I'm an electrical engineering graduate from Auburn, and I have 2 daughters, one of which is a freshman in engineering at Auburn. So happy to be here.
Oh my gosh, what a full circle kind of probably experience to see her going through her first year.
Absolutely.
Bring back memories?
It brings back a lot of memories. It doesn't seem like 25 years ago.
Sure. Well, we're happy to have you back, Chuck, metaphorically. I'll turn it over to Jan.
All right, good evening, everybody. I'm Jan Bell. I am human resource leader for Train. I work directly with Chuck. We cover the Southeast states. And as Chuck indicated, we do commercial heating and air conditioning and have a strong emphasis on sustainability and ensuring that energy usage is optimized. So looking forward to talking with everybody tonight, and thanks for being here.
Awesome, and happy to have you here. And I think I see Mandy back on, and see if the audio has resolved itself.
Can you hear me?
Yes, perfect.
Perfect. Okay, my apologies. I had a glitch and it caused me to get off the computer, so I had to use my cell phone. So luckily I have that. So Mandy Ledkins, I work for International Paper. I'm the HR lead for the organization and do a lot of recruiting on campus. Excited to discuss topics around recruitment and selection and kind of figuring out how to navigate through that process. I'm excited to talk to you guys.
Awesome. Thank you, Mandy. So as you all may have seen in the title of the event, right, we're going to be spending some time talking about hiring practices and what is a typical hiring process for these industries. But more specifically, we're also going to be spending some of our energies talking about issues of implicit bias. For those of you who may or may not be familiar with the concept of implicit bias, I'll provide a quick little operationalizing definition pulled from the Curran Institute for the Study of Race and Ethnicity at The Ohio State, which is my PhD alma mater, so I'm a little biased toward them. But they define implicit bias as the attitudes or stereotypes that affect our understanding, actions, and decisions in an unconscious manner. When we think about implicit bias, what the research shows us is that everyone has some sort of implicit bias. And in some cases, you may actually hold implicit biases against your own social groups. And so we think it important that when we're talking about the hiring practices to consider the ways that implicit bias and implicit biases may be manifesting in these hiring practices. But before we get into kind of the meat of our time together, I'm going to allow the panelists to talk to us a little bit about, what does a typical hiring practice look like for your specific industry? If you would want to give us a brief overview of what you have seen. And we'll start kind of the opposite way. Mandy, if you want to take it away.
Sure. So depending on the position that we're recruiting for, if we're speaking about going on campus and recruiting for our engineering positions, which is typically what we do, we basically have an approach where we utilize what we call IP ambassadors. So I actually had the honor of being an IP ambassador for Auburn because I'm an alumni, graduated from the College of Engineering and Chemical Engineering many years ago, and get to go back to campus. And so one of the things we try to do is foster our relationships with organizations on campus, whether that be speaking at student chapters, providing gifts in order for chapters to go to their regional meetings. So just ways to kind of get ourselves on campus and branded on campus. And then we do a lot of our recruiting in the fall, where we have opportunities for both full-time as well as interns and co-ops. And so while we're on campus at the career fair, we typically try to see what students fit within what we consider our core values and our culture that we have cultivated over several years. And so we have those conversations with students. Then we will have on-campus interviews where we'll kind of probe a little bit more around, safety, leadership, skills, communication, team networking, those sorts of things, motivational fit within our organization. And then if, we feel like it's a great fit, we actually ask those students to attend what we consider an on-site event. So with International Paper, not a lot of people have been exposed to the pulp and paper industry. And so I know I was not one of those that had been exposed. So it is definitely a different type of environment. The manufacturing environment in general is pretty different. And so it allows these students that we feel like are great fits for our organization, the opportunity to explore the manufacturing environment and what an actual mill, a paper mill, does and what the processes are. So that is basically like a 1.5 day event. We have them come to an area where one of our mills is located. They participate in interviews, they participate in team activities, and they also get a tour and get to kind of see the area just to see if they're a good fit. If that works, we then extend an offer to them, and then they have the ability to come back to whatever mill made them the offer and visit the area, visit the mill to see if it's a good fit. That's one of the things that I think International Paper does a great job of, is making sure that it's a good motivational fit, that it's a good fit for that student so that we can retain them.
Yeah, for sure. It sounds like a super comprehensive process, and also enjoy hearing that the Auburn family is running strong throughout all of these places. So thank you for sharing a little bit about that, Mandy. Jan, I know that Jan and Chuck, you're both representing Tran, but I'm sure you'll be able to provide different perspectives or fill in gaps. So sure. Jan, will you take it away?
Sure, we can ham and egg it here for a little bit. At Train, we typically, much like Mandy, we try to have a presence on campus with some of the diversity groups, with some of the engineering groups, to ensure that we have our name out there, and as Mandy said, that we have a brand on campus. The students that we're typically looking for are engineering students who have realized that they probably don't want to be behind a desk or perhaps be in a plant or those types of environments, but would rather be kind of out and about and seeing people face to face and having kind of a diversity of skills that they're pulling on. So we will typically look for the students who have engaged in leadership activities throughout school, whether that be a leadership in sorority or fraternity, leadership in an organization, leadership on senior projects, on capstone projects, those types of things. So once we find those students, we typically do group interviews at one of our locations, depending on where that hiring is taking place. And we like to bring in rising seniors, so students who are finished with their junior year, starting their senior year, and have them intern with us the entire summer. It was sort of a summer-long interview whereby you see if we fit you, and we see if you fit us, and typically give a project that has a great deal of meat to it, whether that's with a new product or a new process that we're doing. And there's a report out at the end of the summer. And generally at the end of that summer, if we mutually decide that it's a good fit, those students would typically leave us with an offer in hand to join our graduate training program, which is in La Crosse, Wisconsin. I'm going to save the graduate training program for Chuck to talk about, so that he can explain a little bit about that, because he's had a number of employees go through that and can speak to that very eloquently.
Sure. So we believe that one of the great things about engineering degree, and Auburn in particular, is that it equips you with the ability to solve problems and to think through how to go about solving those problems. And so we hire all engineering disciplines. We then put them through the graduate training program, which I participated in 25 years ago. And that graduate training program, I like to refer to it as a PhD in HVAC. So it is a deep dive into everything air conditioning, heating, ventilation, and building comfort within those buildings, as well as how to take our systems and explain those somewhat complex systems to both technical individuals and non-technical individuals. So it brings together between 30 and 50 people from all over North America, and it's a great learning environment for 6 months. And we believe it equips you when you get back to be successful in the roles that we have.
Yeah, for sure. And it sounds like a long-standing program. So clearly something is working if it's been around for this long.
Absolutely.
Greg, would you like to end us talking a little bit about what the hiring process relates to your company?
Sure. I would say, from our perspective, we're not that much different than everybody else. The biggest challenge I think we have is that Enercon isn't as well known as International Paper or Train. We're a medium-sized engineering company, so when it comes to what our big challenge is making sure that we're branding ourselves well out there and we're getting exposure to great schools like Auburn. From an engineering perspective, yes, we participate in info sessions and go to a variety of career fairs looking for, as Chuck said, engineers across all disciplines, mechanical, electrical, and civil. When you're at a fair, one of the things we found is that, especially with COVID going on, we think that students are going to be pulling the trigger on, the first offer they get in many cases, offers very quickly. So one of the things we're trying to really do is to have interviews very quickly after we meet people at the fairs, and then extend offers relatively quickly as well to get the top talent in as soon as we can. When someone accepts an offer and they come on board, we want to set them up for success. So we'll pair them up with a buddy or a mentor in the group that they've been assigned to, because we service a lot of clients in the utility industry: Florida Power and Light, NextEra, Entergy, TVA, Southern Company. And so when somebody comes on board, they don't necessarily know where they're going to be going. They know they're going to be doing mechanical, electrical, or civil engineering. They're not necessarily sure the client group. So based on need, we'll assign them come time. And in those groups, they're assigned that buddy. But they'll work across disciplines on a variety of projects. The clients that we work with give us the tough projects. They don't give us the easy ones. So we need to make sure we're working very well with one another to do that, and we make sure that they get the training in order to know how to do that well. So it's a comprehensive program as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Greg. So fun fact for everyone attending, when I was back in the day, I used to be a hall director in a residence hall that was specifically for people pursuing careers in mathematics and other disciplines, including engineering. And so hearing you all talk about, the different kinds and the different pathways is bringing me back to being in those halls. And I remember even back then having conversations with students, especially those from historically minoritized backgrounds, around, being anxious around what does it mean to find a job, and what does it mean to find a job that is respectful, right, of my holistic self. And so I wonder, to start getting a little bit into the conversation for today, if the panelists wouldn't mind kind of sharing with us, what is the state in your particular company, organization, or in your industry broadly that you've seen around how these organizations are advocating for the representation of minoritized communities within companies? And perhaps for some of you who have been around a little longer, in what ways have you maybe seen that evolve compared to when you first started out?
Well, I'll chime in and just say that, STEM programs are obviously, very, very important. And we want to make sure that we're doing everything we can to increase diversity of students entering, a STEM career path. Whether that be in our case, we've established an inclusivity, diversity, equity, and awareness committee with executive sponsorship in our organization, and it basically focuses on diversity and inclusion with our recruiting and hiring practices, our client subcontractor relationships, and basically our overall employee culture. And from a nuclear perspective, we also partner with INPO, which is the Institute of Nuclear Power Operations National Diversity and Inclusion Panel, to increase representation of candidates entering the nuclear industry. So we know it's important, and that's a little bit about what we do.
Yeah, so I'll kind of add a little bit to what Greg has said. So when I started with International Paper was 18 years ago, and back then there weren't a lot of female representation within the STEM system within Auburn. But then, especially not within International Paper for an engineer, a young engineer. And so one of the things I've been able to notice is throughout the years, we got better as an organization in really honing in on what we want our culture to be. And with that, one of the things that we understand is that diversity is so important, not just from a demographic standpoint, but just diversity of thought, diversity of backgrounds. I mean, that's so important to make you a successful organization, a successful company. So throughout my years, I've noticed it's I see more females in engineering roles. We see more females through our management organization. More minorities are coming through. So it's exciting to see those things. Several years ago, we actually appointed a CIO, an inclusion officer, who is their sole, purpose is to ensure that we have diversity and inclusion within our organization, and that we're constantly at the pulse of what's going on in society, that we're addressing those issues that we find and the opportunities that we find within our organization in order for everybody to feel inclusive. One of the things that we have as far as goals is we have our 2030 goals. Part of that is to increase the amount of female representation, the amount of minority representation within our organization. And so we've set these goals, and I've been honored to be a part of the diversity and inclusion team that is a part of building what our plan is going to look like in order for us to get those goals. We're talking about stuff around networks within our hourly ranks and trying to get that female and minority representation there. We have within our organization to help support diversity and inclusion, we have networks around the female population. So every quarter we have a call where all of the females within our organization get on, talk about the topics that are important to us. We have that as well for other diversity groups. So it's exciting. I know with everything going on in society, it's exciting to work for a company that is really thoughtful in understanding what the issues are and bringing them to light, and just really having that safe space to have those conversations in order for us to all get better.
Yes, of course. Thank you, Mandy. And then Chuck, were you going to chime in as well?
Yeah, I think Mandy could be working for Train right now. It sounds like we're doing a lot of the same things. I heard her mention goals for women and minorities at senior levels, and we have the same type program with Paradigm for Parity. We have PDI events where we have where we're encouraging conversations and we're facilitating conversations on topics that have been uncomfortable, and we have ensuring that our panels are diverse and make up what it is we're trying to achieve, not necessarily where we are today. And so it has changed a lot. We're in technical sales. We're also in construction and in the construction industry. And roughly 30% of our population employees are gonna turn over in the next 5 to 7 years. And so increasing all people into STEM, but for sure women and minorities into STEM, and encouraging that and bringing them into the workplace is something that we need to continue, and we're getting better at. But as Mandy said and Greg said, when we started, there were very few, and so we're making progress.
Yes, and I so appreciate you all bringing attention to these issues, because as scholarship tells us again and again, right, that STEM context, it is common for women, for people of color, for women of color, right, to be disproportionately pushed out based on the cultures that are sometimes created. However, it sounds like your organizations and your companies are leading the way in terms of thinking about how do we change this, right? How do we make it so we create welcoming and inclusive environments for individuals from all backgrounds? And perhaps that might actually be a good transition to thinking about this notion of fit that we oftentimes think about in hiring practices, right? Fit can be a really good thing, right? We're looking for someone who matches our positive organizational culture that we have. We have developed a really strong foundation, and we're looking for people to be in that foundation. And then fit can sometimes also be a negative thing. And that is my dog in the background sharing his perspective on fit. But fit can also be used to exclude people, right? If you have a large group, for instance, we're talking about women, right, of men, some may see women as not necessarily fitting within that particular culture. And so I wonder if you all can speak to, in what ways have you seen this idea of fit used in negative or positive ways within your particular kind of industries, organizations, line of work?
Yeah, so Dr. Duran, I'd like to comment on that. So you're absolutely right. Fit can be something that has been learned over time when you've hired the same role over and over again, and you've seen the type of individual, the background, the temperament of individuals who do well in that role and also who don't do well in that role. So you develop kind of a profile in your mind as a hiring manager and as someone who's recruiting that this type of person is going to do well in this role. So in that regard, fit can be a positive thing because it can improve the success of the hires that you make, which works for the company and works for those individuals. Where I've seen that become a negative is primarily when you have interview panels that have, let's just face it, a bunch of middle-aged white guys on them who, who see things one way and who can't get past that that kind of profile of the best fit. So the way you combat that is you have diverse interview panels who where and make sure that that both the women and the minorities on those panels are individuals who aren't afraid to speak up and aren't afraid to challenge norms. And when that happens, that's where the kind of magic happens with battling that kind of the negative aspect of fit. When the general consensus is in an interview panel that someone doesn't have that, they just don't fit us culturally, and having those people who can say, well, why not? Why wouldn't she be able to do that role? Or why wouldn't she be able to travel a little bit less because of a family situation? Or why wouldn't he be able to fit in because of X? That's really where I've seen that be able to be counteracted.
For sure. I mean, with my conversations with my students, I say that there are oftentimes coded words that are used at times, So whenever we say that's interesting, I'm always like, well, what do you mean by interesting, right? There's typically another emotion, another idea behind that particular word. And as you're bringing up, Jan, that same kind of situation sometimes applies to fit, right? Like, oh, I don't see them fitting within our company. Well, what do you mean by fitting, right? Like, that assumes that there's already a culture, right? And that someone is external to that culture. So I appreciate you bringing up that. Mandy, I see you want to chime in as well?
Yeah, I was just going to add to Jan's comments. I think really one thing that she said that I think is true is having that diverse interview panel. When a candidate can see themselves across the table, they tend to think, hey, okay, well, she can do it or he can do it. Why can't I? And it just makes you, more valuable in sharing those experiences, being able to relate to maybe what they're talking about. But also, I think just training in general around unconscious bias with your interviewers, having them be self-aware of maybe some biases that they have, because that's really where you're going to start turning the tide on unconscious bias is, hey, we've got to look at ourselves, understand what our biases are so that we're sensitive to those things. When we're in that interview, we can start saying, okay, well, I know I'm sensitive to certain things. I'm going to be open when interviewing this candidate. Being International Paper being such a large manufacturing company, a lot of the hourly positions that we have some mindsets that females can't do the same thing as men within our organization. Some of those mills have really labor intensive jobs, and there are people out there that think, hey, a female can't do this. And it's really opening the minds of those employees to say, well, let's not just assume that because she's a female that she can't do that, or because I'm a minority, I can't do that. Let's ask the questions. And to Chuck's point, let's ask those difficult questions and have that difficult conversation to better understand the fit in the organization.
Yeah, I'm hearing great recommendations, whether it be diversifying hiring committees or taking implicit bias tests, which are thankfully now much more common, right, that are empirically proven. So some things are already coming out. I did notice that Chuck also maybe wanted to chime in a little earlier.
You ask about a positive example of fit. Back about 7 years ago, we hired a female engineer from Auburn, and she was involved in Cupola, and Cupola hosts students there on campus, prospective students on campus, and so she did an amazing job. She's still continuing to do an amazing job for us, and so we connected with the Cupola ambassador and asked, do you have more like her? And so that was a case where, she was an example of where there was positive fit within the organization, because she demonstrated through those actions of being out in front and being willing to speak on behalf of Auburn and for Auburn, somebody that exhibited those traits and was a good fit.
Gotcha.
The only other thing I'd add to what Jan, Mandy, and Chuck said is that we're again a smaller employee-owned organization, and coming from the recruiting perspective, one of the things I think as a recruiter I always want to know of is making sure that the engineers are asking the right questions, asking everyone the same questions, analyzing the answers that are provided, and really sticking to the facts of the answers that they have been provided. It's easy, like Jen, you had mentioned, you get 3 white guys across the table, and they all are very close. They all work with one another, and that can be a dangerous thing because we can lose out on talent. It's a very, very competitive industry, the one that we're in, and we have to make sure that we're holding ourselves accountable overall, and that the engineers are holding themselves accountable to look for the best talent. And I have been in rooms where we're discussing candidate interviews and candidates, and I've seen 2 of those people say, no, I don't think they're the right fit. And the third person said, well, why? You have to really boil it down and say, why do you think they're not? Well, I didn't like them. Well, that isn't good enough for me. You have to really decide what it is in the skills that did or did not fit, or work rather, to establish if you're going to be moving forward. Because if we hire the right people, our profits go up, and it doesn't matter what their gender or race or anything is. You just want the top talent. That's what matters most.
Greg, you mentioned kind of digging deep into questions, and one thing that's helped us, and I'd encourage the students, is we use behavioral-based questions, and so we're asking for a situation and then ask them to describe the action. But really more than that, asking them to describe the impact that they brought to that situation. What was the result from doing so? And that gets us out a lot of times of some of that subjective. Did we connect with that person and got more into the details of what was the result of what they did?
Awesome. Thank you for that, Chuck. And it sounds like a good recommendation for the students to be thinking about, what types of things are they going to be asked to do in certain interviews or in different kind of hiring processes. That being said, I am encouraging the students, as we're hearing our panelists talk about their particular experiences, do be thinking of questions that you may want to ask them. That time is coming on up. So feel free to be asking questions in the general chat function or in the private chat function as well. So we've already started talking a little bit about this issue of fit and how it manifests, right? The image of the 3 white guys around the table that Jen and Greg kind of touched upon. I wonder if you all can expand and potentially give examples of other ways that you all have seen implicit bias manifest in hiring within your particular industries.
Dr. Ram, one thing that I caution my folks about is a lot of times, and this is one of those dual-edged swords things as well, is we encourage employee referrals of when we have an opening, we encourage employees to refer friends or colleagues who they know could fill the role. So that's another way that we have to be very careful, because when you have referrals, typically someone refers someone who looks like them, has the same background as them, has, there's a lot of commonality. So that's one area where implicit bias can sort of manifest itself. It's not to say that those individuals, typically we get great employees from employee referrals, so you don't want to shut that off, because that's a great way to find excellent employees. It's something to be conscious of and aware of when you are bringing in employee referrals, that you typically get more of the same.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the notion of social capital will just engage in social reproduction cycles, right? Like if you're tapping the same networks, the chance of that network being pretty homogeneous is going to be high.
Sure.
Mandy, were you going to share something as well?
Yeah, I just wanted to add to what Jan was saying. That's how a lot of companies get, their employees or their pipeline into certain positions. I think the other thing that's important is to have really meaningful one-to-ones. So where you have maybe some internal movement within your organization, where you've got some openings, to really focus on how can we internally promote people through our organization that make good fits, but asking those questions around, not assuming because she's a female and has children, or whatever the case may be, that they can't move up within the organization. And I think that gets back really to the basic type things that we talk about from a human resources standpoint, is really meaningful one-to-ones, where you're open and honest about what your goals are, where you want to be, what you want to be when you grow up. We've talked about that, but really understanding, what that person wants to do. And then from an organization standpoint, do we really have the flexibility to make that happen? So, hey, do we have an opportunity? This person wants to be in a specific role, but they're going to have to move. Well, can we create that role, or can we give them that opportunity, or give them those skills in another way, to really think outside the box and understand, what flexibility do we have in order to make that a good fit for that person?
Great example. Great example. Greg or Chuck, anything that comes to mind for this particular question?
You mentioned homogenized recruitment. I was guilty of that. We would recruit Auburn, and we found lots of great engineers from Auburn. And I was not aware of AEP program. I was not aware of 100 Women Strong. And so we were not connected with those groups. And so we were recruiting the career fair and connected with some other organization, and we're getting, as Jan said, referrals. And so we were in essence fishing out of that same pond and catching the same fish. And it served us well, but it also, I didn't intentionally include. So I was unintentionally excluding. And so now we make a conscious effort to intentionally include. And so we're doing things like this, and we are actively recruiting some HBCUs, and we're making sure that our slate of candidates are diverse. And so it gets into bias a little bit, but we just continued doing the same things that we've always done, and we were getting the same results, unintentionally excluding.
For sure. And there were just as talented kind of pools or ponds, to use the pond analogy, but it was just all about, really tapping into them and finding them, right? And so you mentioned expanding into HBCUs, which for those of you on the webinar who may not be familiar with that term, stands for Historically Black Colleges and Universities, and also thinking about the different organizations within an institution that are created to assist and uplift minoritized communities as well. And I appreciate your kind of honesty, Chuck, and kind of sharing, at what point it's what it did, right? It was in question. And that's the thing to what was said earlier is that, referring itself is not an issue, but it is sometimes when we don't critically analyze our process of referring, that then where it becomes kind of this self-reproductive cycle. But I see Greg might have something to chime in and hear about as well.
All I was going to add to that is it really boils down to awareness. If we go back a year ago, I can tell you that our company wouldn't have been as aware as we are now about these things, simply because it's a new day and age. The world's a little bit crazy, or a lot crazy, however you want to look at it. But we have to really be aware of how we're branding ourselves, and because students this is high on their list. And if it's high on their list, it's got to be high on our list, and we have to address it in order to attract the right talent. So it's not just those, the people in the interviews, it's the people we decide to send to the career fairs. It's the people we decide to send to talk to women in technology, or to, NSBE or whatever. It's just being aware and being very conscious and deliberate about how you're branding yourselves and who you're sending to represent your organization. We're very focused there.
Gotcha. Thank you, Greg. And yeah, and I appreciate you kind of mentioning that, the current kind of social context that we're in kind of reflects this need for diversifying our thought. And actually, we have a question that just came in that might actually relate to that. And so I'll be interested to hear what you all think. So the question was as follows. Can you talk about or provide an example of why it matters to the work your company does to have a diverse group of employees and thought leaders, right? We've kind of been talking about that it's good, but maybe giving a little step backwards of like, why is it important for your company to have a diverse group of employees and thought leaders? And when has it made a positive difference in the work that you do?
I'll just say, personally, I'll just look at our recruiting group. We have myself, we have a gentleman who's of Indian descent. We have Charlotte, who's from Belgium. And, we have Bree, she's also from the US, but we're diverse in recruiting. But personally, I think it would be boring to work with a bunch of people where we don't have a diverse population. I think our stories are what shape us and what make our organization strong. And when you have different stories, things you can share and learn from one another, things don't stay static. Things are dynamic, and a dynamic environment is what helps an organization grow. So I just think it would be boring and bad for the organization to not have a diverse culture.
Yeah, I'll kind of add to Greg's comment. I think about if you have this great idea, or you think it's this great idea, but it's the worst idea ever, but you've got a bunch of people that think the same as you, they're going to think, well, yeah, that's a great idea. Let's go do it. And then you're not going to be successful because it was a dumb idea to begin with. But if you have that one person in your organization that says, wait a minute, and starts asking those questions and those tough questions, then you start having that diverse thought, and you start asking, well, yeah, what makes this such a great idea? So, I've been in different types of teams, on different types of teams throughout my career. I think probably what comes to mind most recently, to give an example, is the diversity and inclusion team that I'm on. Really understanding, we've got, African American, we've got females. It's really diverse. And so hearing their perspective around something, the way they felt within the organization at a certain time, just allows us to learn about ourselves and really apply what we've learned to make the organization a better place to work.
Jan, were you going to share something as well?
Yeah, I would echo what both of them said. It's, to have diversity of thought, diversity of background, helps make better decisions within an organization. If everyone has the same perspective, then it becomes you do get a lot of everybody just kind of going along for the ride and not having the people who will say, hey, have you thought about this, or have we ever done it this way, or do you think maybe that the individuals involved would respond to this approach? So you get a lot better decisions, and you get a lot more engagement when people see individuals in leadership who look like them, and when people have coworkers who have that diversity.
Yeah, it sounds like, it's not just diversity for diversity's sake, right? And what all of you are discussing is that inevitably diversity is going to make the organization better in the sense that it provides a wide range of perspectives and thoughts. And it probably also makes you all as employees better as well, right? By giving you all that different vantage point and that different perspective from the examples that you all are offering. And I want to go back to something that Greg kind of mentioned a little earlier on, and you discussed that at the end of the day, as we were thinking about issues of implicit bias in hiring practices, it is all about awareness, is what you stated. And so to that point, I wonder if you all can speak a little bit about how is it that you've come to reflect on your own implicit biases as it relates to hiring in your field?
I think it's something that has to happen at every interaction that you have, so as every interview begins, or as every engagement begins, where you're talking about where you're talking to or about potential candidates or future employees. I think you have to really step back and have that conversation with yourself. Particularly if you're dealing with somebody or interacting with someone who there's just something where you feel like maybe you're not responding to them, or maybe there's something that bothers you about them, or that you're not quite connecting to. I think it's important to step back and ask yourself why that is. And if it's something objective, if they're not giving good answers to questions, or if they're not being thoughtful in their responses, then that's one thing. But if it's something to where they remind you of someone who you don't like, or they look like an ex-boyfriend or girlfriend, or whatever the case may be that you might be reacting to at an unconscious level, I think it's important to have that kind of step back and have that conversation with yourself.
Yeah, I would agree with what Jan said. I think it's that, as well as a combination of a competency-based hiring model where all the candidates are being asked standard interview questions and they're being fairly assessed. It's a combination of all those things. But yeah, I mean, it's a matter of doing a deep dive and being mature enough to look at yourself as an individual and say, what is it? There's something there, and you just got to dig it yourself to find out what it is.
Yeah, I'll kind of add to Greg and Jan's comments. I mean, really, it gets back to what Chuck was saying around those behavioral-based questions. I mean, I think if you really focus on what those questions are driving at around safety, around leadership skills, around communication, working as a team, things that are important to your organization, and you think about what's important and what's a core value within your organization, I think that gets you thinking about, okay, that keeps you consistent within from candidate to candidate. Also being aware, I know we talked about that earlier, but just being self-aware of what your biases are, and just kind of saying, okay, I know what my biases are, so I'm going to make sure that I'm very objective when it comes to the answers they provide to the questions that I'm asking.
Well, that might be a good transition. So I have a couple more questions, and then I'm encouraging anyone on the call to develop their own questions and put them in the chat. But a lot of you are talking about, the things that have helped you now. And I know what is great about this webinar is that students are kind of getting this inside look at how companies are thinking about, issues of diversity, implicit bias, as well as just the hiring process in general. And so I'm wondering, like, what does this mean for the students on the call, right? And specifically, these students are going to be the ones going through the hiring processes soon, or eventually going to be the ones who are leading the processes themselves. And so I wonder what you would tell an undergraduate student about the topics that we've been kind of discussing, and how they themselves can be thinking about these issues in their context and addressing them in their context.
I would encourage them to engage, and what I mean by that is we're coming to events. We're trying to find ways to connect with diverse candidates, and so when they have the opportunity to engage with some of the companies and representatives from the companies, take advantage of that, and start trying to develop a conversation, and know that culture matters, and really ask questions about the company, ask questions about the culture, ask questions about hiring practices and recruitment and onboarding and development and future leaders and where you are, and know that you heard 3 companies today that are all trying to get to a different place than we are today. And so that's good, and that's okay. And but engage and ask questions.
I'll kind of tack on to Chuck's comments. So I think the biggest thing that a student can do while on campus is to get involved, be engaged, but get involved as well with all the student organizations. So especially if it's important to you to feel included and engaged, 100+ Women Strong, SWE, AEP, SHIP, NSBE. I mean, there are so many different avenues to connect with other students where you can really have good discussions about the processes that you're going through with various companies. The other thing is companies are trying to get with those chapters and those organizations to reach diverse candidates and to understand, what's important to those students. The other thing is just ask those recruiters why they're with the organization. What makes them stay with their company? I think you'll get a lot of insight, into what's important to them, and see if that aligns with what your values are and where you want to go within an organization. Because I think that's really key, is you need to feel comfortable with what your career path is going to be, with how you're going to be included when you interact with those recruiters on campus.
I'll also add the fact that a commodity we can never get back is time. And if I could go back, and I could go back to my college self and say something, I'd say get more involved, take some educated risks, don't be afraid to step out of your comfort zone and do something to try to differentiate yourself from the other people that are trying to get the same goal you are. And along with what Mandy said, yeah, I mean, it's probably going to be it could be a whole other day and a whole other topic, but you want to be able to get out there and differentiate yourself from everybody else and ask questions and be smart. I can tell you that the engineering team I work with, or alongside, I should say, sometimes they'll say, you know what, the answer he gave wasn't right, or the answer she gave wasn't right, but it was thoughtful. And they had a way of supporting the answer that they provided. And when I think that, Jan, Chuck, Mandy, all of us want to hire students that are thoughtful, that are smart, that are confident, and that are willing to step out of their comfort zone to get somewhere and to do something good for a company they work for. I'd encourage you to get involved and take some risks that are smart.
Greg,
That's the time to do it.
That's absolutely true. And what you said was great advice. I would add to that, don't sell yourself short. You're just as smart as the person sitting next to you. And I've got news for you. You're just as smart as the person who's been doing that job for 10 years. They just have more experience than you. So just, maintain confidence. Don't sell yourself short, because the experience will come, and you'll be fine.
Yeah, and that's such important points from everyone in terms of what students can be doing now in terms of involvement, right? Being engaged, not selling yourself short. And I think that is an important one, because we actually got a question around, can you think of any specific behaviors candidates can attempt to control for in an interview that may help interviewers to limit bias? And I'm interested to hear what you all think, because I actually had a little visceral reaction that it's like, that we don't necessarily want people to be changing themselves, right? And so I wonder if you all can speak a little bit to that question and what comes to mind when you can you think of any specific behaviors candidates can do to control for an interview that may help interviewers to limit bias?
I can remember a young woman I counseled years ago who was very early in her career. And I was running a sales training organization at the time. And every time she had a presentation, she was, bright off the charts, just a smart young woman, and had so much going for her. But every time she got in front of a group to do a presentation, she would giggle and have, and be, she would use, phrases that were that diminished herself. And so I counseled her I had her for 6 weeks in a training program, and we worked on that for her to stand with confidence in front of a group, and to not feel like she had to make a joke or have a nervous laugh and that type of thing. So a lot of times just, body language, phrases that you might say that might be self-deprecating, those things can come off negatively in an interview where you don't appear as confident as you really are, or as smart as you really are. So I would just be conscious of those types of things that you're doing. Excuse me.
Yeah, I'll kind of add to Jan's comments. First of all, we don't want you to change who you are. So
No.
That is not something that we want you to do, because at the end of the day, if you're changing who you are, guess what? If we decide to hire you, you're going to be that different person every single day. You're going to be miserable. You're not going to be happy within the organization. So you need to find a good fit where you don't have to be different. You can be yourself. Because that's gonna be what gives you that long-term career that you're wanting to find. The other thing, the biggest thing is be yourself, be professional. Do those things that the student center is telling you to do around show up on time, dress professionally. Make it to where people think you want a job with that particular company. That's really the biggest thing. So don't change yourself. Don't change your mannerisms. Be yourself, because that's what we want at the end of the day. And if it's not a good fit, it's not a good fit. And actually, it's better that you understand that early on, rather than getting within an organization and it just not being a good fit then.
Right. I appreciate that point, Mandy. If you are someone different in the interview, then you have to be that different person when you actually get the job, right? And so I value all of you all sharing about just being confident in yourself, really owning that, as opposed to necessarily feeling like you have to change in order to fit in with a group. And with that, Chuck, earlier you talked about, ask questions about the culture of a company, because ultimately you want to be in a place where you feel like you are welcomed and you feel that you are included in. And I wonder if you all have any suggestions for our students out there who may be taking feverish notes about, like, what are the types of questions that you ask in order to assess that, right? In order to assess the culture of a company and how one might fit in with it.
Yeah, when I think about culture and assessing culture, Mandy mentioned and Jan mentioned, we try to bring students in for a group session, kind of that final interview. And during that time, I think it's important to meet with people that are in different roles in the organization and different ages and experience levels within the organization. And so, and I think it's important to if when you get those opportunities, to ask people that will be your peers, what's it like working here? What does a day in the job look like? Where do you see yourself in the next 3-5 years? What do you enjoy about this job? And just really, I think it says a lot for a company when they open you up to the ability to have conversations with lots of people within the organization without management present, and you get to know people on a personal basis. And so I just encourage you to have those one-on-one conversations with both people that have been there a long time, but also people that are new in that job. That'll be you hopefully in a year or two.
Other thing I'll add to what Chuck said is, ask people if you have the opportunity if you don't have the opportunity to meet other people, maybe you're just having an interview with one individual, have them tell you about the people on their team. Have them describe the team that they work on, and tell me about 2 people on your team, and see how they tell you what they tell you, but then see how they react when they're telling you it, because that's one thing they're probably not focusing on. If I told you about Hardy, I'd tell you he's a great guy. He tells some funny jokes. He always brings in good food. I like Hardy, and I do. But if I were to say, well, Hardy's this guy that just, it's just a different way. So what does that say about Greg and the team he's on? I know he doesn't like Hardy, and that's not true. The other thing I'll say is, if you get the opportunity to look in the distance, look at not what's happening in front of you, but if you're going on a tour of a facility or you're seeing other people, look at people that don't know you're looking at them. See what they're doing 40 feet away. Look at the interaction if you can, and listen to 2 people that don't know you're watching them, and see how they get along and see how insightful that is. You can glean a lot of information from things at a distance.
Great advice. Look 40 feet away, and ask about how people feel about the people on their team. Hardy has some ups and Hardy has some downs, but it's good to know about Hardy on the team. Anything else from Mandy or Jan before we may move on to? Well, we do have time for perhaps one more question. If anybody out in the audience would like to ask anything of our audience members, I'll give it a beat. And if not, I can ask my final question. Okay. Seeing none, I would love our panelists to close out with thinking about, what is the future of addressing implicit bias within your industry, or, just increasing the representation of diverse candidates within your organizations? What do you see as being the future? What are your hopes moving forward? And any final kind of thoughts or pieces of advice?
I know I hope with the increase in the number of women that I see coming out of STEM programs, with the number of minorities that I see coming out of STEM programs, I really hope that our employee population can start to look more like the communities that we live in, and look more like what the class populations are coming out as. I think that would be a positive thing for business in general, not just our industry, but to have that diversity start to filter through to organizations is really the ultimate goal, and where I see us going.
Yeah, so I think, I kind of talked about, with International Paper in particular, we've got 2030 goals. So we've got these goals set 10 years from now. So what are we going to do in order to successfully achieve those goals in 10 years? And I think it's exciting to hear other organizations, other companies, talking and having those same conversations, because we all understand and we all feel it. We all want that diverse organization. I think the key thing is maybe not so much focus on the diversity part, but really more focusing on the inclusion. I mean, we can get diverse candidates into the pool and within the organization, but how do we keep them there? And it's really understanding that company culture and those things around, our unconscious bias, being self-aware, in order to really hone in on how can we be an inclusive company where people want to stay within our organization.
Great point. It's not just about recruitment, it's about retention, right? Like, people can enter, the company, but if they absolutely don't like it when they get there, then the system continues to fall apart. And so I appreciate you bringing that point up, Mandy. Final thoughts from Chuck or Greg, or final pieces of advice?
The only thing I would add is just going back to the awareness piece. I mean, this is not going to go away quickly. It's something that, the first way to fix something is to admit that it's there and recognize that it's there and that you're taking steps to fix it. So I think all the organizations are doing that, but it's going to have to evolve over time, and we're going to have to change as it evolves.
Dr. Van, I would say that I just appreciate Auburn doing this, both from an employer's perspective. I think it's a great forum for us to have conversations. From a parent of a daughter in engineering at Auburn, I think it's wonderful that she's got opportunities to connect with companies that are looking to increase diversity in the workplace, and as Mandy said, retrain and reward them throughout their career. So I think it's great, and thank y'all for doing this.
No, thank you all. And I hope that our students are paying attention to your particular companies as organizations that are doing the work that needs to be done. And so I want to close out by saying, this has been such an enriching conversation, and I appreciate all of your perspectives that you all have shared over the past hour and a half or so. So thank you for engaging with us on this. And at this point, I will turn it over to Jessica, who will do our final potential closing comments.
Thank you, Dr. Duran. Just wanted to thanks to each of our panelists and to Dr. Duran for facilitating tonight. We're just excited to be discussing these topics as these are the kinds of organizations our future engineers are here to think about going into the workforce with once they finish in their engineering program here at Auburn. So we have one more panel program next Wednesday, same time, 4:30 to 6, on navigating sticky situations in the workplace. My colleague Marissa Miller will be facilitating, and as you saw at the top of the program tonight, ExxonMobil, NASA, and Southwire will be our panelists for next week. So thanks again for joining us this evening. We hope you have a great night.
Thank you.